Good evening, everyone. I and Ma'am Sherilyn were tasked to discuss the topic, which is about language development. So we actually prepared different PowerPoint presentation. So bear with us as we discuss what this topic is all about. So next. So at the end of this discussion, we hope that you will you'll be able to understand how the use of language develops and also explain how do children acquire language. Before we proceed to the topic, I will discuss to you. I have your questions that I would like you to reflect on. Okay. Do you ever think about how life would be without language? Um, how would people communicate if we never had languages? And do you think that there is really a need to, a need of language in our lives? So I want you to take a moment and imagine a world without language. So what's your thought about this? How do you see our world without language? Any opinion? Any ideas? Can I have your thought, please? Okay. So I think, in my opinion, no one or nobody would actually picture our lives without language. Because if it didn't exist, I think um, we would still live very precariously. Precariously. Because it is actually the communication that becomes the key for everything. Diba? The different cultures that we have, the evolution that happened, the globalization, the new ideas that we think every day, and also the technologies that we are experiencing right now. I guess these are all because of the language. Okay. So what do you mean by language? I know this question is very common, but let's first define what language is. So language is a communication system that involves using words and systematic rules to organize those words to transmit information from one individual to another. So language is a principal method of human communication. Meaning to say, it's a means, it's a tool that we use to communicate, and the reason why we do understand each other. Many people believe or think that um, language is a form of communication, but not all communication is form of language. Why do I say this? Because there are many species in the world that communicate through gestures, through movements, through orders, diba? Through vocalization. So it is the reason why we believe that it's actually the language that makes human being unique among all the animal species. Okay? So another, it says there, languages are the primary means of communication of humans and can be conveyed through speech, sign, or writing. So, meaning to say, language can be spoken, it can be written, or it can be a means of, using visual modality to convey meaning. Moving on, let's now come to the two main areas of language. So the first one is receptive language. It says there it's the comprehension of language. So receptive language is the understanding of information provided in a variety of ways, such as the words and sounds, the signs and symbols, and movements and gestures. So listening is one of the most important component of receptive language. And aside from listening, it actually involves more than just. Based on what I've read, children now often acquire the element of receptive language faster than of expressive language. And this is the reason why we or our receptive language vocabulary is greater or larger than of our expressive language. So how do we observe, or what's the you know scenario, or scenario that we can actually observe that there is a receptive language skills? So first, following simple to multi-simple directions, like go give the give um go get the ball, or go give daddy the ball, or pick up the toy and put it on the table. Another one, it's is answering comprehension questions, such as the five W's, the what, when, where, why, and who, based on a story or a picture. Another one is understanding a vocabulary or, let's say, a concept that somehow help us to describe something or to talk about something. Okay. And number four is inferencing or making predictions, also based on story or a picture. For example, you're going to show a sign of, or yeah, a symbol of sign stop, and you're going to ask, what do you mean by this? So these are some of the scenarios in which we can observe deceptive language skills. Okay. Next, how about the expressive language? So expressive language, as you can see there, it's the use of language through speech, sign, or alternative forms of communication to communicate wants, needs, thoughts, and ideas. So receptive language is our ability to communicate our feelings, our thoughts, our ideas through words, through gestures, through signs and symbols. So talking is the main form of communication when people talk about this expressive language. So meaning to say, expressive language as a whole means using the unique areas of language to correctly and effectively communicate what we're thinking. That's why the use of vocabulary, the grammar, and sentence construction are very important in expressive language. Okay, let's now move on to the next one. Okay, let's now come to the components of language. So we all know already of what are these components of language. So this topic or these components of language is a sort of review. Okay, so the five components of language are phonology, morphology, syntax, semantics, and grammatics. So the first one is phonology. So phonology is the study of the sound patterns and their meanings both within and across language. So for example, it's the study of the different sounds and how they come together to put or to form speech or words. For example, the word pop up, diba? You would actually compare how the letter P there is being pronounced. But when these two are being combined together, it actually produces new speech or new words or new sounds. Okay, so that's phonology. The second one is morphology. So what do you mean by morphology? So in linguistics, morphology is the study of words, how they are formed, um, the relationship of words or other words in the same language. And it also analyzes the structure of words or part of words, such as the root words, the prefixes and suffixes. And in morphology, it's also concerned with the parts of speech, the stress, the intonation, and so on. Okay. The third component is syntax. So syntax is the structure of sentences. So it actually comes from the Greek words synthesis or syntaxis, which means what do you mean that it actually means arranged together. So syntax refers to the rules that govern the way in which words to combine phrases, sentences, and clauses. Okay. So, sabi nga ni Kayan, if you can change the position of even one word, it's possible for you to change the meaning of the entire sentence. Okay. So, the covers topic under syntax are the grammar rules. So, the subject-verb agreement is one of that. And also the placement of direct and indirect objects. So that's also the concern of syntax. Number four is semantics, or the study of meaning. So simply, syntax is the study of meaning in a language. So it can be applied in the entire text, or it can be applied to a single word. So for example, the words destination and last stop. But technically, they mean the same thing, but students of semantics would actually try to evaluate the shades of the meanings of these two words. Okay, that's semantics. Number five is pragmatics. So pragmatics is nakalagay po dyan, language and context. So pragmatics is the study of how context contributes to the meaning. So it's also a field of study that evaluates how human language can be utilized in social interaction. Or in some linguists, they say that pragmatics concerns with how the speech community members achieve their goals using language. So, di ba, the way we speak to our parents is not the same when we interact with our siblings. So, same with our conversational style of our day-to-day, di ba, is very different from our language when we were asked to read a storybook to a toddler. So, meaning to say, knowing the difference and what style to use is the essence of pragmatics. Moving on, let's now come to the theoretical perspective of language development. Okay, the first one is behaviorism or behaviorist theory, which is proposed or which was proposed by B.F. Skinner. So I put it there, physical environment, because behaviorism has something to do with the environment. So sabi dito, it was responsible, or B.F. Skinner was responsible for defining the segment of behaviorism known as operant conditioning. So what do you mean by operant conditioning? So operant conditioning is actually a process by which an organism learns from its physical environment. So behaviorism or B.F. Skinner believed that um, the behaviors are somewhat result of operant conditioning. So he believed that if behavior is followed by reinforcement, that behavior is more likely to be repeated. But if that behavior is somehow followed by some sort of punishments, then that behavior is less likely to be repeated. So meaning to say, children learn language through giving rewards. Okay, that's the theory of B.F. Skinner, behaviorism or behaviors theory. So let's now come to the next one. Okay, the nativism or the nativist theory. So I put it there, biological factors, because it has something to do with biological factors. So the nativism or nativist theory was proposed by or developed by Noam Chomsky. And Noam Chomsky believed that, or according to him, infants have the innate ability to learn language. For example, diba, the child would not say, juice, I want. Instead, the child would say, I want juice. So meaning to say, children are able to do this even before they have developed much of vocabulary. Okay. So what's the role of the LAD or the language acquisition device in his theory? So LAD, or known as language acquisition device, is actually a theoretical area of brain that somehow explain how a children learn language so quickly. So meaning to say, if you were to take a look inside a person's brain, you would not see a section labeled as LAD. Diba? So meaning to say, language acquisition device or LAD is much more of a theoretical idea. So it actually for um, accounts for the ways in which children have have the innate ability to understand language and symbols. So meaning to say, language acquisition device is meant to help us understand why we're so good in understanding or learning language. Okay. Next is the interactionism or the interactionist theory proposed by Vygotsky. So both biological and environmental factors are important in language development. So this biological and environmental pertain to the nativism and behaviorism theories. So interactionism is believe that both the environment, again, and the um, biological has something to do with how child develop language. So meaning to say, interactionists believe that language is byproduct of child's interaction or social interaction and the important people around them. So he believed, or the interactionist believed, that language acquisition occurs as a result of what we call this natural um, interaction between the child and their environment, more specifically the parents or the caregivers. Okay. Meaning to say, the environment that you grow up will heavily affect how well and how quickly you learn to talk. So that's actually the theory of Vygotsky, interactionism or interactionist theory. So let's now move on to the next one. Okay, the basic outline of the stages of normal language development will be discussed by Mom Sherilyn. Let's now come to how do children cognitively develop language. So the first one is comprehension. So the first major cognitive development, because children begin to comprehend before beginning to speak. This is actually true. Why? Comprehension, it actually includes all the words and words combination that children understand, and only requires that a child recognize the meaning of the word. For example, an adult might actually tell to a toddler to play with a toy blocks, or with to play with toy blocks. So the adult now, I mean the toddler now, will point to their toy blocks. So meaning to say, this just show that the toddler understands what is toy blocks, or what is a toy blocks. So that's comprehension. Okay. The number two is production. So it is an advanced form of comprehension because children must recall the concept that a word stands for, and also be able to recall the word. So in production, there are actually two important things. So the referential style and the expressive style. So these two have something to do with the one that I discussed a while ago, the two main areas of language. So when we say referential style, so it's actually the children uses language or uses vocabulary to refer things. So they try to label the objects, the people, and they try to structure their speech in to be able to be understood. Okay, so they actually tend to interact more with adults than or less with peers. So that's referential style. But how about the expressive style? So expressive style, it says there, it use language mainly to talk about feelings and needs. So they use fewer nouns and more of social and functional words such as hi or mine. So meaning to say, language is used mainly to express needs, to express feelings, and of course to socialize. So that's expressive style. Okay. Moving on, let's now come to the two common mistakes. So I don't know if you are familiar with this already, but in my actually in honestly, this is the first time I learned that the term is, or the term are, under extension and overextension. So what's the difference between under extension and overextension? So under extension occurs when a word is given a narrower meaning that it has in adult. So meaning to say, it's a common semantic error made by children. For example, a child may believe that that the label dog can only apply to summer their family pet. So meaning to say, there is an incorrect restriction of the use of word. Okay? And the second one is overextension. So overextension occurs when a word is given a broader, more general meaning that it should have So for example, they actually call other male as dad. So this is not because the children or the child doesn't detect the differences. It's actually because he or she doesn't have other words to use yet. So they actually try to extend the meaning of a word based on a specific, beyond the specific meaning of that word. So that's overextension. So when they try to refer to all animals as doggy, So that's actually overextension. Let's now come to the next one. Okay. The language style. Have you heard of this already? So there are actually three in the language style. So mother is. So mother is sometimes known or sometimes called as parent is, diba? Because we all know that it's not actually limited to mother. It also includes to a dad, to grandparents, or to other caregivers who somehow interact with our child. So, sabi dito, or in other research, or in research, it's called IDS, or Infant Directed Speech. So it's the simple form of language mothers often when talking to their babies. That's why it's called mother-baby communication, because it's just between the mother or the caregiver and baby communication. So the mother is, or the parent is, actually does not include the verbal words. They actually incorporate or employ hand gestures, facial expressions. So this is very, or these are very important in communicating with their child. Okay. So sabi dito, it uses baby words, short sentences, and simplified grammar, exaggerated speech, melody, and a very repetitive style. So another important factor or another important component in mother is the pitch or the tone of the voice of the mother or the caregiver. It's also observed in the language development of a child. Okay, next. So the next one is a child-directed speech. So, or what we call the CDS. So it says there it's a dialect adults use when speaking to very young children. So it can help build a young child vocabulary, create social feedback, and improve language acquisition. Or the CDS is also known as baby talk. So in child-directed speech, the adults use simpler language when talking to small children. For example, instead of saying, would you like a glass of water? You have to say, or you might say, do you want butter? So meaning to say, the grammar and the word choice is very important to somehow consider in giving or in communicating with your children. So that's CDS, or child directed speech. Right. Let's now come to the last one, the joint attention. So what do you mean by joint attention? Joint attention is a behavior in which two people focus on an object or event for the purpose of interacting with each other. So it's a form of early social and communicative behavior. So joint attention involves using common focus or something such as, to other people, objects with someone else. So it actually requires the ability to gain, to maintain, and to shift attention. So for example, a parent and child may both look at the toy they're playing, but this is somehow what we call shared attention. Okay, so this is what we call joint attention. So it's actually gained by using eye contact and gestures. So that's all for my um, presentation. I hope you learned something from what I discussed. And to end this discussion, I here a quote from Oliver Wendell Holmes. He said that language is the blood of the soul into which thoughts run and out of which they grow. Again, good afternoon.